Recent years, I've seen an unprecedented number of M&A deals in the data center space. To talk more about what's happening in the Nordics in particular, I've got here Pieter-Jan Bouten, Managing Director of Greenhill. PJ, thanks a lot for talking to me. Let's start by a general look into the Nordics. What is happening in terms of M&As?
Well, I think when it comes to Nordics M&A, it's still quite early stage. I mean, there's kind of the big kind of for sale sign with DigitBacks, but real kind of M&A activity is not as kind of mature market as we've seen in kind of London and Frankfurt and Amsterdam, where there's much deeper M&A market. What's happening in the Nordic region, on the other hand, is a lot of investment coming in, and that's getting people very excited, and that's why we've got a full room behind us of people interested and wanting to learn more, and on the investor side, people that are willing to put money to work.
Okay, but let's just talk about DigitBacks for a second. Rumor has it, or what's out there in the market, is that the price tag is quite high for this sort of company. Not for this sort of company, for this market it's a very high price tag. And the rumor has it that it won't be the digital realties or the Equinix of the world that will come into buying this company. It will be a private equity fund. What do you know about the deal, or what do you think of the deal?
It is a full sale process, it's a formal sale process, and I think the jury is out kind of whether in the next couple of months who will be the ultimate kind of owner. Clearly it will be the one who puts the largest sum of money on the table for the business. And what is interesting, kind of you mentioning infrastructure funds and let's call it private capital, is indeed that we've seen a big trend of private capital looking at data centers as an asset class. And being very comfortable with data centers because they provide an essential service, there's high barriers to entries, there's recurring cash flow, so it ticks a lot of boxes. And you're right, I think it's something that is in particular business that attracts interest from both, it's called private capital, you call them infrastructure funds, as well as what I would consider as kind of the more natural consolidators, those players that we have typically seen as the ultimate acquirers of assets. If you think about the big deals that happened in London, Telecity and Equinix, but also Digital Realty, or in Frankfurt, where clearly recently CyrusOne picked up Zenium. So I personally still feel that the more natural consolidators when it comes to European M&A, and also I think to some extent relevant for the Nordics, should be those people who actually have a benefit of being in this region, which is an important region, and therefore ultimately be willing and be prepared to pay the highest price for this business.
Okay, and when you look into the business model, how does the business model sort of impact the attractiveness of a deal of this sort?
Well, I think again, in the data center space, we've got a huge variety of business models, and therefore we've got actually quite a big differentiation when it comes to valuation. And where it ultimately boils down to is when you look at a data center opportunity is, okay, where is it located? What is the access to power? And what is the customer base? And then you start on the back of that looking at actually the use case and the investment case of the proposition. Is it a single tenant or a multi-tenant environment? How interconnected is it in terms of kind of the fiber connectivity that data center has? And ultimately, what is kind of the growth profile of the business, and where does, and very relevant, especially for the Nordic region, where does hyperscale fit in that? I mean, can this facility benefit from the huge kind of demand and of hyperscalers, and can you get the hyperscalers into your data center, which makes it a very attractive connectivity hub, and which makes it a very attractive business model to invest in.
And when it comes to the smaller guys, to the boutique data centers, how is the game changing for these guys?
Well, again, when it comes to let's call the legacy independent players, they very much depends of their own kind of place in the market. I mean, with that I mean is that those players that actually have a very comfortable recurring revenue stream and are well located and have a good customer base, they should be very well positioned, and they should be strategically interested in a broader consolidation game. There's those that actually do not get the location right, or have lack of ability to kind of scale up, and ultimately they don't necessarily tick the boxes, and there's the ones that actually see them more kind of in, let's call the restructuring and repurposing kind of category. And then finally, when we talk about kind of smaller data centers, and again we've talked about it a lot today, is the big opportunity when we talk about the edge, and where you see from the, let's call it the micro-modular single-user data center to indeed the multi-tenant data center on the edge, which sees kind of smaller data centers play kind of a very valuable role in the overall value chain.
Okay. And then from a finance and investment point of view, and maybe from a personal point of view, what's been the most interesting thing that you've seen happening in the market recently?
I think it's going to be, I mean, whilst historically we've seen, let's call it M&A driven by diversification, and I think the big diversification was the traditional wholesale REITs going into retail colo and getting very comfortable about it. What I personally think is fascinating is this kind of the constant globalization of the data center industry, and with that kind of the increasing let's call it deal flow driven by the need to have an ever expanding footprint. And historically, the leader in that, arguably in Europe, was kind of the Japanese, and they made some of the early bets in the 80s and the 90s, and now that kind of a lot of those investment decisions are now increasingly being led by kind of some of the big West Coast operators like Equinix, who've been very kind of ambitious and aggressive in picking up some core assets, not just in the traditional flat markets, but also more recently looking at Madrid. And players like Digital Realty that have also been very successful in driving an M&A strategy. But they're not the only ones. You see then the next second tier of DC players following that same strategy. Sara is one very good example, both organically when they think about some very big capex decisions in Dublin, in London, and inorganically with Zenium. So hugely attractive movements, and definitely something to look forward to, seeing more of that, let's call it arms race, and more of that footprint expansion, not just in the Nordics, but across Europe.
Okay. When you said the Japanese and you other Asian people, the Asian branch, can the boards flip again? Can we go again into having Asians having more power in Europe in terms of the market? Or is it going to be more balanced?
Well, we've seen, again, when it comes to the Asians, the ones that are arguably more active in the market have been the Chinese. And obviously they've made some very big kind of investments into, let's call it, existing platforms, and therefore they are putting capital to work. And that's definitely a player that sees this as a very valuable part of the communications infrastructure supply chain, and therefore a very interesting investment proposition. So you're right, the jury's out on who's going to be ultimately the winner, but I think kind of, let's call it, the natural leaders, the oligopolists, and we've got a few in Europe when you look at kind of Equinix, Digital Realty, but also Interaction, are very well placed to continue to benefit from that first mover advantage.
Okay. If you had to bet your money who's going to be the next one to be sold, who will that be?
Well, the next one to be sold, well, we'll see.
Not the ones that we know about.
No ones that we know about. Do you know about Taraka in South Africa? We do. There you go. So I think interestingly, we expected kind of deal activity to kind of dry up a little bit, but there's always another opportunity. There's always another market. We're spending a lot of time now in the Nordics, but that can easily shift back to kind of Southern Europe, where there's still a lot of opportunities there, and increased demand from the hyperscale guys and the cloud guys, and an increasing amount of internet traffic. So the data centers will follow the traffic and will follow the demand, and I think it will be anyone's guess, but there's going to be more to come beyond the Nordics as well.
Okay, PJ, thanks for talking to me. Don't forget you can follow Data Economy on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter, and also visit the website on www.dataeconomy-.com.